Sometimes the most satisfying moments in our careers come not from what we gain, but from watching karma deliver justice in the most unexpected ways. This is the story of how one woman's greed and nepotism backfired so spectacularly that it became the talk of an entire company. Sarah Martinez had been working as a senior marketing coordinator at Pinnacle Communications, a mid-sized advertising agency in downtown Chicago, for nearly 4 years. The autumn wind whipped through the concrete canyons of the business district as she made her way to work that Tuesday morning, clutching her coffee against the biting November air. She had no idea that this ordinary day would become the catalyst for one of the most satisfying acts of professional revenge she would ever witness. If you're enjoying this story of workplace justice, please subscribe to our channel to help us bring you more real stories like this one, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from around the world. Sarah had always been known for her meticulous attention to detail and her ability to turn creative concepts into profitable campaigns. Her cubicle was organized to perfection, with color-coded files and a whiteboard covered in project timelines that she updated religiously. The office buzzed with the constant hum of creativity, designers calling out to copywriters, account managers rushing between meetings, and the perpetual sound of keyboards clicking as deadlines approached. The agency occupied 3 floors of a glass tower that reflected the gray Chicago skyline, and Sarah's desk sat near a window that offered a view of the bustling street below. She often found inspiration watching the pedestrians navigate their daily routines, each person carrying their own stories and struggles. Little did she know that her own story was about to take a dramatic turn. For months, Sarah had been developing a comprehensive digital marketing campaign for Morrison Electronics, a potential client that could bring in over $2 million in annual revenue for Pinnacle Communications. The project, dubbed Digital Horizons, was her brainchild from start to finish. She had spent countless evenings researching market trends, analyzing competitor strategies, and crafting a presentation that would blow Morrison Electronics away. The campaign focused on leveraging social media influencers and targeted advertising to reach millennials and Gen Z consumers who were increasingly making purchasing decisions based on brand authenticity and social responsibility. Sarah had identified key demographics, created detailed buyer personas, and even developed mock advertisements that demonstrated the campaign's potential impact. Her research was exhaustive. She had conducted focus groups, analyzed social media engagement patterns, and even reached out to industry contacts to gather insights about Morrison Electronics' target market. The presentation deck she created was a masterpiece of strategic thinking, complete with projected ROI calculations, timeline milestones, and creative concepts that perfectly aligned with the client's brand values. But Sarah's biggest challenge wasn't the complexity of the campaign or the tight deadline. It was navigating the treacherous waters of office politics, particularly when it came to Amanda Whitfield, the boss's daughter who had been hired as a marketing specialist 6 months earlier despite having no relevant experience beyond a communications degree from an expensive private college. Richard Whitfield, the agency's founder and CEO, had built Pinnacle Communications from a one-man operation in his garage to a thriving company with over 60 employees. He was respected in the industry for his creative vision and business acumen, but his one blind spot was his 25-year-old daughter Amanda. Richard genuinely believed that Amanda had inherited his entrepreneurial spirit and marketing genius, when in reality, she spent most of her days scrolling through social media, taking extended lunch breaks, and delegating her responsibilities to junior staff members. Amanda had a corner office that she had barely earned, decorated with expensive furniture that her father had purchased for her. Her walls were covered with motivational posters and awards from college that had nothing to do with marketing. She dressed impeccably, always wearing designer clothes that cost more than most employees' monthly salaries. And she had a habit of speaking with an air of authority about subjects she clearly didn't understand. The tension between Sarah and Amanda had been building for months. Amanda regularly took credit for campaigns that other team members had developed, and she had a particular talent for inserting herself into high-profile projects at the last minute, just in time to present them to clients and receive recognition. Sarah had watched this pattern repeat itself with several colleagues, but she had always managed to stay under Amanda's radar by keeping a low profile and focusing on her work. That changed when Morrison Electronics expressed serious interest in Pinnacle Communications services. Richard announced during a Monday morning staff meeting that the agency would be pitching for their business, and that this could be a game-changing contract for the company. Sarah saw this as her opportunity to finally showcase her skills and potentially earn a promotion to senior account manager, a position she had been working toward for over a year. She volunteered to lead the campaign development, and Richard agreed, impressed by her enthusiasm and track record. For the next 3 weeks, Sarah worked tirelessly to create what she knew would be the best presentation of her career. She arrived early, stayed late, and even worked weekends to ensure every detail was perfect. The budget allocation for the project was substantial: $40,000 for research, creative development, and presentation materials. This included funds for hiring freelance designers, conducting additional market research, purchasing premium software licenses, and creating high-quality mock-ups and prototypes. Sarah had carefully itemized every expense and submitted a detailed budget proposal that Richard had approved without hesitation. Everything seemed to be going according to plan until Amanda discovered the project's potential value. Sarah first noticed something was amiss when she tried to access the shared project folder on the company's server and found that her permissions had been restricted. When she asked the IT department about it, they told her that Amanda Whitfield had requested the changes, claiming she was now the lead coordinator for the Morrison Electronics pitch. Confused and concerned, Sarah immediately went to Amanda's office to clarify the situation. She knocked on the frosted glass door and waited for Amanda's characteristically delayed response. When she finally entered, Amanda was sitting behind her oversized desk, scrolling through her phone while a half-eaten gourmet salad sat forgotten beside her keyboard. "Amanda, I think there might be some confusion about the Morrison project," Sarah began diplomatically. "IT says you've restricted my access to the project files, but I'm the lead coordinator for this campaign." Amanda looked up from her phone with an expression of feigned surprise. "Oh, Sarah, actually, my father and I discussed the project over dinner last night, and we decided that it would be better if I took the lead on this one. It's such an important client, and I have some really innovative ideas that could take the campaign to the next level." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "But I've been working on this for 3 weeks. I've already developed the entire strategy, created the presentation materials, and allocated the budget. The client meeting is next Tuesday." "I know, and I really appreciate all your preliminary work," Amanda said with a patronizing smile. "It's given me a great foundation to build upon. Don't worry, I'll make sure you get credit for your contributions in the acknowledgments." The casual dismissal felt like a slap in the face. Sarah had experienced workplace disappointment before, but this was different. This was theft, pure and simple, dressed up in corporate speak and family privilege. She wanted to argue, to fight for her project, but she knew that challenging the boss's daughter directly would likely result in her termination. "What about the budget?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've already allocated funds for specific research and creative elements that are integral to the campaign." "Oh, that won't be a problem," Amanda waved her hand dismissively. "I'll just need you to transfer the budget allocation to my project code. I have some different ideas about how to utilize those resources." Sarah's blood began to boil, but she maintained her professional composure. The budget was specifically allocated for research methodologies and creative elements that support the strategic direction I've developed. If you're changing the strategy, the budget allocation might not be appropriate. Amanda's expression hardened slightly. "Sarah, I appreciate your concern, but I think I'm perfectly capable of managing a marketing budget. After all, I did study business at Northwestern, and I've been observing how successful campaigns are developed since I was a child. Trust me, I know what I'm doing." The meeting ended with Sarah reluctantly agreeing to transfer the budget and provide Amanda with all her research materials. As she walked back to her desk, her mind was racing with anger and disbelief. She had been outmaneuvered by someone with a fraction of her experience and skills, and there was seemingly nothing she could do about it. Over the next few days, Sarah watched in horror as Amanda began dismantling her carefully crafted campaign. The strategic focus shifted from authentic brand engagement to flashy visual elements that looked impressive but lacked substance. The research-driven approach was replaced with Amanda's intuitive understanding of what young consumers wanted, which seemed to be based primarily on her own shopping habits and social media preferences. Amanda also began hiring expensive freelancers and vendors that were friends from her college social circle, regardless of their qualifications. She commissioned a custom video production that cost $15,000, featuring her sorority sisters as authentic millennials discussing their purchasing decisions. The video was polished and expensive-looking, but it completely missed the mark in terms of Morrison Electronics' target demographic and brand values. Meanwhile, Sarah was reassigned to work on smaller, less prestigious projects. She watched from the sidelines as Amanda prepared for the Morrison Electronics presentation, making increasingly questionable decisions about the campaign direction. The original strategic framework that Sarah had developed was buried under layers of expensive but ineffective creative elements. The night before the presentation, Amanda stayed late at the office, frantically trying to piece together a coherent pitch from the various expensive components she had commissioned. Sarah could see the light in Amanda's office from her apartment window across the street, and she found herself feeling a mixture of anger and pity for someone who was so clearly in over her head. The presentation day arrived with typical Chicago November weather: gray skies, biting wind, and a light drizzle that made the city feel even more unforgiving than usual. The Morrison Electronics team consisted of 3 executives: Janet Morrison, the company's CEO and daughter of the founder; David Park, the chief marketing officer; and Lisa Rodriguez, the director of digital strategy. They arrived at Pinnacle Communications offices at precisely 2 o'clock, dressed in the conservative business attire typical of traditional electronics companies. Janet Morrison was a woman in her 50s who had earned her position through years of strategic thinking and market analysis. David Park was known in the industry for his analytical approach to marketing and his skepticism of campaigns that prioritize style over substance. Lisa Rodriguez was a digital marketing expert who had previously worked for major tech companies and had little patience for poorly researched strategies. The presentation took place in Pinnacle's main conference room, a space designed to impress clients with its floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture, and state-of-the-art audiovisual equipment. Richard Whitfield introduced Amanda as the campaign lead, praising her innovative approach and fresh perspective. Sarah sat in the back of the room, officially there to provide support, if needed, but really just a witness to what she expected would be a disaster. Amanda began her presentation with confidence, clicking through slides that featured expensive photography and sleek graphic design. She spoke enthusiastically about reaching authentic millennials and creating viral moments that would revolutionize Morrison Electronics brand perception. Her language was filled with marketing buzzwords that sounded impressive but lacked specific meaning or measurable objectives. The trouble began when David Park asked about the research methodology behind the campaign's target audience identification. Amanda fumbled through a vague explanation about demographic insights and consumer behavior patterns, but it quickly became apparent that she hadn't actually reviewed the research that Sarah had conducted. Can you provide specific data about the correlation between social media engagement and purchasing behavior for our product category? Lisa Rodriguez asked pointedly. Amanda's face began to flush as she realized she couldn't answer the question with any specificity. Well, the research shows a strong correlation between social media presence and brand affinity, particularly among younger demographics, she said, hoping the generic response would satisfy their inquiry. What research specifically? Janet Morrison interjected. Can you cite the studies or provide the data sources? The room fell silent as Amanda shuffled through her notes, clearly searching for information she didn't have. Sarah watched from the back of the room, feeling a mixture of second-hand embarrassment and vindication. She had anticipated this moment, knowing that Amanda's superficial understanding of the campaign would eventually be exposed. The research was conducted by our team using industry-standard methodologies, Amanda said weakly, avoiding eye contact with the clients. I can provide you with detailed findings following this meeting, but the damage was already done. The Morrison Electronics team exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their declining confidence in the presentation. They had come expecting a data-driven campaign from a respected agency, and instead they were getting buzzword-filled fluff from someone who clearly hadn't done her homework. The presentation continued to deteriorate as Amanda attempted to explain the expensive video production she had commissioned. The video featured her college friends discussing their authentic reactions to various electronics brands, but the conversations were clearly scripted and the participants obviously had no genuine connection to Morrison Electronics' target market. These focus group participants, David Park observed, they seemed to be primarily discussing luxury lifestyle products rather than electronics. How does this relate to our customer base, which consists primarily of tech-savvy professionals and small business owners? Amanda's confidence was visibly cracking. Well, the beauty of this approach is that it demonstrates aspirational brand positioning. We're not just selling electronics. We're selling a lifestyle that resonates with emerging consumer values. Lisa Rodriguez leaned forward, her expression skeptical. But our market research indicates that our customers make purchasing decisions based on product specifications, reliability ratings, and cost-effectiveness. This lifestyle approach seems disconnected from their actual decision-making process. The questioning continued for another uncomfortable 10 minutes, with Amanda providing increasingly weak responses to their legitimate concerns about strategy, budget allocation, and measurable outcomes. Richard Whitfield, who had been beaming with pride at the beginning of the meeting, was now shifting uncomfortably in his chair as he realized his daughter was failing spectacularly. Finally, Janet Morrison spoke up. "I appreciate the time and effort that has gone into this presentation, but I have to say that this campaign doesn't seem aligned with Morrison Electronics' brand values or target market. We're looking for a strategic partner who understands our business and can provide data-driven solutions that deliver measurable results." The meeting ended with polite but cool handshakes and promises to be in touch that everyone in the room knew were meaningless. As the Morrison Electronics team left, their disappointment was palpable. They had been genuinely interested in working with Pinnacle Communications based on the agency's reputation, but the presentation had convinced them that the company wasn't the right fit for their needs. After the clients departed, Richard called an immediate debrief meeting in his office. Amanda sat across from his desk, her earlier confidence completely deflated, while Sarah and several other team members were called in to discuss what had gone wrong. "That was not the presentation I was expecting," Richard said, his voice carefully controlled but clearly frustrated. "Can someone help me understand how we went from having a promising opportunity to losing a potential $2 million client?" Amanda attempted to defend her approach, claiming that the client simply didn't understand innovative marketing strategies and that Morrison Electronics wasn't ready for a forward-thinking campaign. Her excuses sounded hollow even to her own ears, and the room's atmosphere grew increasingly tense. It was then that Sarah made her decision. She had been silent throughout the disaster, watching her stolen project implode, but she realized she had an opportunity to demonstrate the real strategy that had been buried under Amanda's expensive mistakes. "Richard, if I may," Sarah said, standing up from her chair, "I'd like to address what happened in that meeting." Richard nodded, clearly desperate for someone to provide clarity about the failed presentation. Sarah walked to the whiteboard at the front of the room and began drawing a simple diagram. "The original Digital Horizons campaign that I developed was based on 6 months of research into Morrison Electronics' customer base. I conducted detailed analysis of their purchasing patterns, surveyed their existing customers, and identified specific pain points in their current marketing approach." She continued drawing, creating a visual representation of the research-driven strategy that Amanda had abandoned. "Our research showed that Morrison Electronics customers are primarily motivated by product reliability, technical specifications, and long-term value. They're not interested in lifestyle branding or aspirational marketing. They want clear information that helps them make informed purchasing decisions." As Sarah explained the original campaign, the difference between her strategic approach and Amanda's expensive fumbling became starkly apparent. Her research had identified specific customer segments, developed targeted messaging for each group, and created a measurement framework that would have demonstrated clear ROI for the client. The budget allocation that was originally approved, Sarah continued, was specifically designed to support research validation, technical content creation, and targeted advertising to reach decision-makers at small and medium-sized businesses. The focus group research I had planned would have included actual Morrison Electronics customers and prospects, not college students discussing lifestyle preferences. Richard listened intently as Sarah outlined the campaign that could have been. Her presentation was clear, data-driven, and directly relevant to Morrison Electronics' business objectives. It was everything that Amanda's presentation had lacked. Why wasn't this strategy presented to the client? Richard asked, though the answer was becoming increasingly obvious. Sarah glanced at Amanda, who was staring at her hands and avoiding eye contact with everyone in the room. "The project was reassigned before I could complete the strategic framework. The budget was redirected toward different creative elements." The room fell silent as the full scope of what had happened became clear. Richard's daughter had not only stolen credit for Sarah's work, but she had also completely undermined the strategic foundation that could have won them a major client. But Sarah wasn't finished. She had spent the last week preparing for this moment, and she was ready to demonstrate exactly how thoroughly Amanda had squandered the opportunity. "I took the liberty of completing the original Digital Horizons campaign on my own time," Sarah said, pulling out a folder she had been carrying. "Since I believed in the strategic approach and thought it might be useful for future client opportunities." She distributed copies of a comprehensive presentation that represented everything Amanda's pitch should have been. The document was meticulously researched, professionally designed, and directly targeted at Morrison Electronics' specific needs. It included detailed customer personas based on actual market research, campaign mock-ups that reflected the client's brand values, and a measurement framework that would have provided clear ROI data. Richard reviewed the materials, his expression growing increasingly grim as he realized the magnitude of the missed opportunity. The campaign that Sarah had developed was exactly what Morrison Electronics had been looking for, and it could have been delivered within the original budget parameters. "This is exceptional work, Sarah," Richard said finally. "This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking that built this company's reputation." Amanda remained silent, clearly recognizing that any attempt to defend her approach would only make the situation worse. But Sarah had one more card to play. During the week following her project's theft, she had done something that would prove to be the most satisfying aspect of the entire situation. She had reached out to her network of contacts in the industry, including several people who worked at Morrison Electronics, and she had quietly let them know that Pinnacle Communications might not be the right agency for their needs. She hadn't badmouthed the company or violated any confidentiality agreements. She had simply suggested that Morrison Electronics might want to look more carefully at the strategic approach of any agencies they were considering, and perhaps ask more detailed questions about research methodologies and customer understanding. Her contacts at Morrison Electronics had taken her subtle warnings to heart, which explained why David Park and Lisa Rodriguez had asked such pointed questions during Amanda's presentation. They had come prepared to evaluate the depth of the agency's strategic thinking, and Amanda's superficial approach had failed their test completely. "There's something else," Sarah said, her voice steady but carrying an undertone of satisfaction. "I received a call yesterday from Janet Morrison. Apparently, they heard through industry contacts that there might have been some changes in project leadership, and they wanted to discuss the possibility of working directly with the team member who had developed the original strategic approach." The room went completely silent. Richard stared at Sarah, clearly trying to process what she was telling him. "Morrison Electronics wants to schedule another meeting," Sarah continued, "but they specifically requested that the presentation be delivered by whoever conducted the original research and developed the customer analysis they heard about through their industry contacts." Amanda's face had gone completely pale. She finally understood that her theft of Sarah's project had not only failed to advance her career, but had actually led to her being explicitly excluded from a major business opportunity. Richard was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with the implications of what he was hearing. His daughter had not only fumbled a major presentation, but her actions had nearly cost the company a significant client entirely. "Sarah," he said finally, "I think you should take the lead on the Morrison Electronics account moving forward. You clearly have the strategic vision and client understanding necessary to make this partnership successful." The irony was perfect. Amanda's attempt to steal credit for Sarah's work had backfired so completely that it resulted in Sarah being officially recognized for her capabilities and given the exact promotion she had been working toward. But the story doesn't end there. Over the following weeks, word spread throughout the industry about what had happened at Pinnacle Communications. The advertising world is smaller than most people realize, and stories about spectacular failures travel fast, especially when they involve nepotism and incompetence. Morrison Electronics did indeed sign with Pinnacle Communications, but only after Richard agreed to a specific clause in their contract that required Sarah to be the primary account manager for their campaign. The Digital Horizons campaign that Sarah had originally developed was implemented with great success, resulting in a 35% increase in Morrison Electronics' online lead generation and a 22% improvement in their customer acquisition cost. Amanda remained at the company, but her role was significantly diminished. Richard could hardly fire his own daughter, but he could no longer ignore her limitations. She was reassigned to work on smaller projects under close supervision, and her corner office was quietly reassigned to Sarah as part of her promotion to senior account manager. The most satisfying aspect of the entire situation, from Sarah's perspective, was watching Amanda slowly come to terms with the consequences of her actions. The daughter who had grown up expecting success to be handed to her had experienced a very public failure that couldn't be blamed on anyone else's shortcomings. 6 months later, Sarah was promoted to account director, a position that came with a significant salary increase and the responsibility for managing Pinnacle Communications' largest clients. Her success with the Morrison Electronics campaign had impressed other potential clients, and she was building a reputation as one of the most strategic thinkers in the Chicago advertising scene. Amanda eventually left Pinnacle Communications, ostensibly to pursue other opportunities, though everyone in the office understood that her departure was the result of her inability to contribute meaningfully to the company's success. Richard had finally accepted that his daughter's talents lay elsewhere, and he supported her decision to explore different career paths. The Morrison Electronics campaign won several industry awards for its innovative approach to B2B marketing, and Sarah was invited to speak at marketing conferences about research-driven strategy development. Her career trajectory had been fundamentally changed by the experience, transforming her from a talented coordinator into a recognized industry expert. But perhaps the most important lesson from Sarah's experience wasn't about career advancement or professional recognition. It was about the power of maintaining integrity and focusing on quality work, even when faced with unfair treatment. By continuing to develop her strategic thinking and refusing to compromise her standards, Sarah had positioned herself to succeed when the opportunity arose. The story became legendary within Pinnacle Communications, serving as both a cautionary tale about the dangers of nepotism and an inspiring example of how merit ultimately prevails over politics. New employees often heard about the Morrison Electronics presentation as part of their orientation, though the details were usually shared informally over lunch rather than in official training sessions. Richard Whitfield learned valuable lessons from the experience as well. He implemented new policies requiring multiple team members to review major presentations before client meetings, and he began paying closer attention to project assignments to ensure that credit was given where it was actually due. The agency's culture gradually shifted toward greater transparency and accountability, partly as a result of the Morrison Electronics incident. Employees felt more confident that their contributions would be recognized and that quality work would be rewarded regardless of office politics. Looking back on the experience 2 years later, Sarah reflected on how a moment of theft and betrayal had ultimately become the catalyst for the most significant professional growth of her career. She had learned that standing up for her work, even in difficult circumstances, was not only the right thing to do but also the smart thing to do. The advertising industry continued to evolve, with new technologies and changing consumer behaviors creating constant challenges for marketers. But the fundamental principles that Sarah had demonstrated in the Morrison Electronics campaign remained constant. Thorough research, strategic thinking, and genuine understanding of client needs would always be more valuable than flashy presentations and expensive production values. Amanda's brief and unsuccessful attempt to advance her career through theft and deception served as a reminder that there are no shortcuts to genuine expertise. In a profession that rewards creativity and strategic thinking, superficial approaches and borrowed ideas inevitably fail when subjected to serious scrutiny. The story of the Morrison Electronics pitch became part of Chicago advertising industry folklore, told and retold at networking events and company happy hours as an example of how workplace karma can deliver the most satisfying kind of justice. For Sarah, it remained a career-defining moment that demonstrated the importance of perseverance, integrity, and never underestimating the power of doing excellent work, even when that work isn't immediately recognized or rewarded.